Hello, this is my submission for the Imperialism video test. Here we go. So, what is imperialism? I found that imperialism is when a dominant country, such as Europe and the countries with inside that, like France and Great Britain, overcome weaker, less dominant countries using force and violence to try to force their ways in, and they think that they are superior, so they spread their race throughout the world because that's what they believe. And this is known to be a form of empire building when going to other countries and overtaking them for their own. Now, what are reasons for imperialism? Reason one: nations really did not want to have to purchase and rely on other countries' raw materials like iron and coal, etc., because that would give them the uphold in case of a battle. They would hold off and they would be without those. So these nations decided to go out and conquer to grasp these, and so that they don't need to rely on any other places for their own materials. Reason two, uh, the need and want for power in this time really struck hard. Nations would go out and just capture and defeat anything they could. This also was like a form of nationalism to them because it was growing and spreading so fast that no one could really handle it. And no matter your circumstance, everybody had to be number one. So everybody was trying to be the strongest so that they could have the most raw, the most land, power, materials, wealth, etc. And honestly, if you have set locations throughout the world, let's say you have a place in Asia, like you have one in China, India, Africa, Europe, Middle Asia, Middle Russia, you have a bunch of safe spaces that kind of surround each other to where you are always on top. Reason four, Christianity and religion had a big role in it. Christians believed, and they still believe, that we need to go out and spread the word throughout the world and tell others, which is what the colonization and spread of people throughout the world really hit. Um, yeah, they thought that everywhere was a place of mission work, and that everywhere you went was like your testimony. So everyone just needed to go somewhere to a civilization that was kind of cut off, like tribes in Africa and India and China, and just spread the word to them to make them convert. And also, reason five, are places with little to no population were so easy to conquer that really it was you it's free land to take. That's what they thought. So they just go in and take that land and make it their own because they didn't really care about how big the population was. And it was so easy to spark their culture with less people that it just came to ease for them. I chose Africa as my place because Africa is one of the more prominent places where it took place. Uh, because since Africa was so big, and the demand for raw materials was also very big, uh, this made those people really want to come and just plant their culture in all those lands. And it held several civilizations. Like you had so many tribes, and you had Europeans going in there, and you had other places going in there just trying to civilize the entire place because it's so big, and people thought it's a good idea. Also, slave trade. This is where it was the worst because people, like their own masters and chiefs, would sell them off. Muslims would have like big slave trades, and they just sell them off for big profit. And this is where people would come in, settle, take those prisoners where they settled, and sell them off to make profit and wealth, which really is messed up. But that's what they thought was right in their eyes, because all they, like, another form of nationalism. They just wanted to be on top and wanted to really take ground for their own. And the time period was 1750 through 1800s, and that's when like 80% of slaves came from Africa. That was big, and it and the European explorers didn't really know what Africa was because we didn't have satellites or maps or anything. So they just called it the Dark Continent because of their race and skin color. And the colonization and just pressure that the Europeans put on them became so severe that there were only two independent nations left, Ethiopia and Liberia. And that's only because they stayed away from him and kind of fought him off, kind of. And this was really hard because Africa's a really big place, and Ethiopia and Liberia are quite small compared to it. So the fact that they took over an entire continent is quite amazing. But France had most of the northern and western parts, and those parts kind of connected to Asia, so they had more leeway and more ability to go out and explore, while the British were kind of cornered off in the bottom parts of the southern and northeastern area, which kind of really hindered their ability to go out and gain more land in Africa. The positive and negative sides of imperialism. The positive sides were the mission work. That was probably the biggest positive out of it, because God worked with imperialism in that trouble in a way that people became more, I don't, not more friendly, but they became more willing to go out and spread the word. That really helped people and their motives. Um, if there was no imperialism state and Christians didn't have the motive to go out, some places may not even have Christianity today. Like, um, places in Africa may not be have churches or anything because we didn't Christians didn't go out and settle those type of places. Also, people would build colleges and trade schools to help those people that were just stripped of everything. They'd help them learn skills and work, gain money, profit. Very good. In the hospitals, many people were sick. Africa, very deserted place, so hospitals were very key, and orphanages. People, honestly, when European nations come in and invade, people losing their lives, losing kids, getting separated, so orphanages were very much needed. And translating the Bible, that really helped people because Africans, I mean, I wasn't alive back then, but I bet that they could not understand uh, whatever language that the French and British were speaking, English and Latin and French. So that really helped. Translations really helped them understand more about the Bible and really helped them connect more, because they felt like the Europeans were helping them in such a way because they like went down to their level and started, they did something for them when they were in need, which really helped them. And Europeans started governments and like just stands where their own country, let's say they had Nigeria had its own government, it could stand by itself, but it's still the British property. Like how America is kind of control of Puerto Rico, but they have their independence, they have their own flag, their own kind of government. But that's kind of really what it tied into. And the negatives were very bad conditions, very torture, slave trade, all that bad stuff. They would torture them and group them with other enemy tribes, and they would start fighting and kill each other because they're enemy tribes and they're not going to get along. So this really sparked rebellion in the Africans and how they would operate. And torturing them probably wasn't the best idea, because now we have a bunch of revolts and everything. Not very good. Um, and they look past human life. They just keep on going. If it killed a person or two, they wouldn't really care. Um, they just keep on going because nationalism, you have to be on top. We keep seeing that occurring role of nationalism throughout this entire imperialism. Another negative was the amount of attention on these native populations. They got no attention. Um, After they were done through and that and Europe had gotten everything they wanted and needed out of there, they just leave them. Whatever type of condition they left in is what they left in. They had probably no shelter, no food. All their natural resources were gone. Very hard to grasp and regather their feet. That may be why still to some day some civilizations still are not to what they could be, living in huts and everything, because they damaged them so bad, left them with nothing. It's almost impossible to come back from it. And then affect their living conditions. Like I said, no houses, no shelters, be very hard on them, and how they operate. PTSD, it'd leave them in a state of mind where they don't know how to operate without someone telling them what to do. Very hard. Um, Also, these European countries would take advantage of the natives and train them and make them fight for their country. They'd have camps and train those Africans to be warriors for those European countries. Like if France took over someplace, they trained them to become French warriors and fight against other Africans in other places throughout the world. So really messed up, not really looking at human life in a really positive way. Nationalism, like I said, keeps occurring. So, well, thank you. That is all I have. I'm going to put my link in the one more page right here so that you can access it. And I'm going to turn this in. Bye.